But there's some rumblings on Knicks Twitter and just I don't know, just in general, I think in the fan base about Julius Randle, right? A guy who has not had the same season this year as he's had last year. I just got cleaning the glass and I'm obsessed with using it all the time. So let me give everyone a little bit of a rundown on where Randall is compared to last season. So the usage is essentially the same: 98th percentile a year ago, 97th percentile this year. Points per shot attempt. So basically a good overall look at his efficiency. 42nd percentile in the league last year, 17th percentile this year. Assist percentage is still, and this is all first position, 97th percentile in the league. Still fantastic. His effective field goal percentage, worst since his rookie year, was not that good last year, but this season all the way down to the 13th percentile league wide. This year, he's better at the rim than he's been, better on close jumpers, but his outside jumper is really where he's struggling. So if everyone remembers last year, Julius was absolutely elite at putting together multiple moves, toasting a guy one-on-one, stepping back, and hitting from somewhere between 14 feet out to the three-point line, or even beyond the three-point line. He was 44% on those shots last year, which was 75th percentile. But I don't think that really tells the whole story, because we're talking about a guy who took these shots on really high volume and still managed to hit them at a relatively good rate. This season, still taking them at high volume, all the way down to 32%, though, on long twos. And then from three last year for a power forward, he was 91st percentile in the league. He's an elite 3-point shooter for a power forward last year. 41%. That was way, way ahead of anywhere he's been in his career. This year back to 34%, which would tie the second highest mark of his career. That is 48th percentile for a power forward. So all that is to say, the summary is this is a guy who last year in a high degree of difficulty diet of shots was pretty spectacularly efficient despite it. And in turn carried the Knicks to a great season. This season, he's taking those same shots. He's not making them at nearly the same rates. And he, in turn, has not been the same player. And Alex, all that is to say, are you worried in the slightest about the contract the Knicks gave Julius Randle, which seemed like a massive discount on the guy he was last season? Maybe an overpay for the guy he'd been every year before last year. Ultimately seemed like a pretty fair deal, but it seems like he's regressing maybe slightly more than you would expect. Or maybe you'd make the case, hey, this is the middle ground between who he was and who he became a year ago.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with the middle ground thing. Let me just ask you this, Gavin. If you were going to rank what, like, so let's say, last year maybe we were talking about, oh, is Julius Randle a top 20 player in the NBA, blah, blah, blah. If you were going to rank him and say, like, Julius Randle is a top X player, just arbitrarily off the top of your head, what would you say?
Probably 75 to 100.
Wow, I
Yeah.
think that's incredibly low on him.
Yeah.
But
Maybe.
regardless, if so, his contract value this year, he is paid as the. It's a little skewed because of this number, but he is paid like roughly the 50 or so lowest player in the NBA in his contract this year, making $20.7 million. That is just below Gary Harris, Fred Van Vliet, Malcolm Brogdon, Harrison Barnes, Aaron Gordon, Mike Conley, Mikal Bridges, Buddy Hield, Terry Rozier. The list goes on and on. I mean, I think that he's paid appropriately for who he is now, like if not slightly, even slightly underpaid for who he is now, if we're being honest, because the reality is that even though the Knicks have been losing, there's been a number of nights where he's basically been the Knicks still this year, uh, for better or worse, And next year he's going to be getting paid 23.7 million, which would still put him in the general vicinity of some of those same guys I just mentioned, like Buddy Hield, Terry Rozier, Draymond Green, Vucevic, John Collins, Jaren Jackson, Jaylen Brown. Maybe he's one of the first ones where you start to say, like, okay, I think he's quite a bit better than him. But like Al Horford still making $27 million. Like, he's not getting paid that exorbitantly for what he does on the court. I think that he does plenty good as far as living up to his contract. And so it doesn't really worry me at all. If let's say that this all goes to hell and you want to completely blow it up in the next couple years, fine. I don't think you would have any problem finding a trade suitor for Julius Randle, even if he still had 3 years left on his contract, because what he does a legitimately good team that can make him like their third option is extremely valuable. The Golden
Yeah.
State Warriors, for example, would jump at the opportunity to add Julius Randle right as Draymond Green is getting ready to, kind of hang it up. Um, so it doesn't worry me at all. I think everything's fine with his contract. And, I'm gonna maybe take the opposite stance of some of like the people on Twitter and whatever, because for example, I tweeted something today just about how the starting lineup is always coming out with low energy. And of course everybody's like, what's the one common denominator? It's Julius Randle. And I'm like, yeah, I agree to some degree. And he certainly hasn't been exemplary, but I think more often than not, he's been one of the only guys actually giving a crap out there. While some of the other players that have been in the starting lineup, like Fournier, for example, have been the ones that have basically been like super timid, not looking to shoot, not looking to defend, not looking to do pretty much anything on the court. And it's just like, what? How is that? I don't think we're taking into account just how defeating that can be for a star player too, even if he should be above that. But like Randall's more of a lead by example sort of guy. So if he's setting an example and he doesn't see others following suit, I think that kind of like hurts his feelings to a degree. And it's not to say that feelings should have any place on a professional basketball court, because you're kind of just supposed to like come in and do your job. But like, I think there's been a little bit more lumped on Julius Randle so far this year than I think is totally fair, given the fact that the rest of the team has not been really performing at all either, particularly his starting mates, who have been, I mean, just the most inconsistent group in the entire NBA. As far as like, Fournier will hit 5 threes and then not be able to shoot for a week. RJ will do the same thing, but then not be able to shoot for a month. IQ coming off the bench, who you want to be playing consistent minutes, goes through these cold stretches like he's going through right now, where he can't hit a three for anything. Like, it's just, I could see where for a player that was used to at least having a security blanket like Reggie Bullock last year, who he knew could hit some threes and play defense with him and stuff, to where this year he might be a little discouraged by how this team is doing, and the weight of expectations kind of bearing down. But it's not to totally write, anything that Julius has done or not done this season off. But I'm not too worried about his contract, and I hope that the Knicks can find a way to make it so he could be the second or third best player at some point, which is what he really should be, rather than right
Yeah.
now where he's almost like he's not quite on the level like Tim Hardaway Jr. when the Knicks were making him their first option. Because I think he's quite a bit better than THJ, but it's sort of a similar situation where I feel like Randall's being tasked with being the alpha and the omega here, and is ill-equipped to do that, and now is catching the heat for it, even though he probably shouldn't.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. And when people argue last year was the perfect storm, you can say that and also say in the context, like, yeah, he was playing a role that he was underqualified for. Last year, like, it took everything going right for him to be right for that role, for just for a regular season. Obviously in the playoffs there were a lot of issues. And this year, like, he's just not that guy. And that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, because to your point, he's not being paid like he should be that guy. And it was a conversation I had with Ariel, but it would be like, I want him to get that opportunity to play off like a Damian Lillard or whoever it may be that the Knicks eventually find a way to get. And maybe like a lot of people, myself included, would immediately shut up and say, oh, this is a guy who can average 20 points and have like a 60% EFG when he's shooting wide open threes and he's rolling to the rim. And that was what we thought this season was going to be with Kemba, with Evan Fournier. And for various reasons, it hasn't been that.